Should be live. Should have audio. Check 1, 2. Looks good. Please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. We should have a nice stream today. Just doing an AMA open session, kind of working session. Just going to be, looking at some models and things like that. So, but like I said, please hit the like button. It helps fuel the algorithm. And ask any questions that you would like us to discuss in the live chat. Any topics that you want to focus on, put them in the live chat. For some reason, I cannot see the live chat, which is not good. But, yeah. Well, try asking a question in the live chat. Hopefully it pops up for me. If not, then unfortunately we're going to have to restart. I don't know what's going on with YouTube. But, yeah, let me see here. Hold on. Hello, Tech Padawan. I see you on my phone, but I don't see you here. Here, let me try something real quick. Bear with me. Okay. Should be back. Should be working. Let me know in the chat if it's working. I didn't know I could do that. If that worked. How's the sound? Hi, Paulina. Hi, Tech Padawan. I see the chat. Great. This is good. We're learning how to fix problems. It is very hot here. I'm just letting you know if I'm sweating. It is over 100 degrees where I am, and my air conditioning is not enough. It's just not. And I've got everything going to this one room, and it's still not enough. I've closed all the vents in the rest of the apartment, so God bless my wife. But great, sounds good. So like I said, ask any questions that you'd like us to focus on, any topics that you'd like us to discuss. Other than that, we are just going to be looking at models and discussing general topics. But one of the things that I did want to talk about, because it was the topic of our call this past week in our Discord. If you'd like to join, please send me a private message on Instagram, and I will send you the link. But we had a discussion over the last couple weeks, actually, over where kind of in general what it has evolved into is what is the divide in understanding the universe. Is it materialism, or is it idealism? Is it theism, or is it deism? And I kind of wanted to focus on this a bit today, unless there's any other topics that you guys want to discuss. We'll also touch on that, but I do want to talk about this a bit. We probably will do our own episode, a video on this eventually, but I do want to just have this as the general topic because I think it's very good. And these discussions have been very good on my Discord, and they've kind of unintentionally been discussions that have tried to drill down on what are the different ways in which you can view the universe and view existence. And sentient singularity theory would imply that there would be 2 degrees of freedom for this, okay? In any perspective that you take. And there would be also an intrinsic constraint and an extrinsic constraint, that these follow the 4 primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness that form the basis of the theory. And both of these, in these 4 primary perspectives, though, there's always 2 degrees of freedom, really. And inside and outside, or separateness and oneness. And so at first, everybody always kind of, in this physics discussion, focuses on materialism versus idealism. You've got, Bernardo Kastrup's analytic idealism, and the CTMU, and sentient singularity theory, even, and I don't know, Donald Hoffman's conscious agent theory, And these are all theories that imply that that mind is fundamental, essentially, is really what it is. And people will say that ideas are fundamental in this kind of model. Is like, and this is not exactly the right, as fundamental as you can get, though. I'm not going to say that it's not more fundamentally true that existence is ideas instead of matter, but I think that we don't understand what matter is, and that's the issue. I'm pretty sure that it was, I think it was Noam Chomsky, actually, who said on Kurt Mungel's podcast that it's not consciousness that we don't understand, it's matter. And I full-heartedly agree with this. And there's nothing that we understand more than consciousness. You know, like, think you have a first-hand running constant view on what consciousness is, and you have a personal experience with consciousness constantly, and you never don't have this. And people, even when people say, "Oh, well, when you're asleep, it's like you're unconscious." No. This is because of we're using the word conscious differently. You're still conscious when you're asleep. You might not remember your dreams, but sometimes you do. And you're conscious in your dreams. We'll say you're unconscious because the people looking at you from the outside don't see you moving much. But I took a video of my dog yesterday, and he was, well, first of all, we took him for a walk, and his name is Noah, and he loves chasing squirrels. It is his favorite thing in the world. He's never caught one. I don't know what he would do if he ever caught one, but if he ever sees one, he freaks out. And so I posted a video on my Instagram of him watching a YouTube video of squirrels, and he's like, it's his new favorite show. And but he saw a squirrel yesterday on a walk and tried to go for it, and didn't catch it. Obviously, he's on a leash. But I don't know if he would have caught it anyway, so squirrels are pretty quick. But he's fully conscious, obviously. And then we played this video that I found on YouTube. It's like TV for dogs or something, and it's just a bunch of squirrels like running around. And he loved it. And then he fell asleep. And he was kicking his feet in his sleep. And I took a video of this too. And he's like barking in his sleep. He's like, like you've seen dogs do this, and you do this. He's basically talking in his sleep, but he's barking. And I asked my wife, I was like, what do you think he's dreaming about? And we don't know, but like I was like, it's probably squirrels. His whole day has been squirrels. Like he's probably now dreaming about squirrels. He's conscious in his dream. It's just to us, he's not like moving around in this world, but like he is probably looking at squirrels in his dream. And we do this. We're not. So when people say, oh, well, consciousness is only existent when you're awake, that's not true. And this is why I use the word sentience, because people would normally say, yeah, you're still sentient when you're asleep. And that's true. So but it's just we use the word conscious to describe like, oh yeah, he's unconscious. He I don't know, he fell asleep, he hit his head, whatever, and went unconscious. And so we also use the word consciousness to describe what is, sentient, and then we, have it in titles of, theories called conscious agent theory. And so it gets a little bit confusing, and that's why I've been trying to avoid using this word. And but if this is the case, then you can't even say. Then it gets tough, because to say what is conscious or consciousness, it's not the right direction, essentially, to head down when we are looking at figuring out the next level of physics or metaphysics. The right direction is what Noam Chomsky stated, which is what is matter. And we haven't really actually delved into this much. People will say, and there was this video that I've referenced on here many times, and it's very good. I highly recommend watching it, because this is another video of a theory. This is a video of another theory that would imply that matter isn't fundamental, but that's not actually really true. It's not accurate enough to say that, even though it is true, but it's not true in the way that you're thinking of, or most likely, and most people. And there's this funny part in this video that it was put out by Clear-Irwin of the Quantum Gravity Research Foundation, and it's called "What is Reality?" It has like 3 million views or something like that on YouTube. I think it was over 2 last time I checked. It's probably over 3 now. And it's very good. And the outline that he gives of I think it's called Emergence Theory is his theory, is very similar to sentient singularity theory and all these other ones that I mentioned earlier. And in it, there's these funny cartoon that's been made of these scientists of the past, and they're arguing over what is matter, or what is reality. And he's like, reality is matter. And he's like, no. Then Einstein comes in, I think it was, and he was like, no, reality is energy. Matter is energy. And then someone else comes in, I forgot who it was, and he's like, no, it's information. And he's like, no, it's energy. He's like, no, it's matter. And he's like, no, it's energy. And he's like, the guy who's saying information is like, no, it's information, and information is energy. And so what this shows is this funny reality that nobody seems to focus on much, in the mainstream discussion at least, which is that we don't know what matter is. And sentient singularity theory implies a structure of nested minds. So you're a mind inside a mind, and that the thoughts of the mind that you're within and its interaction with other minds, and even with you, causes the concretizing of certain thoughts that it's having that are coherent, that you can't break. And then all of a sudden you get, matter in those. When there's a thought that has to be coherent of the mind that you're within, which is really of the minds beyond you, is really what is a better way of putting that, then you encounter that information as unchangeable by you in any way that would cause incoherence. Okay, so you have to change this by melting it down or something like that physically, and that physical change allows for a coherence to be maintained, versus just like deleting information and then inputting information out of context, from somewhere else, versus you're taking the information that's there and you're changing it. And it's like editing a document in your desktop and then saving it. So you open a document, you edit it. You can change that water bottle into, I don't know, it's made of steel. You can change it into a fork and a knife or something. And that would be coherent change. But you can't just delete the water bottle and then input a fork and a knife. God might be able to do that, and maybe that's what a miracle is. But that is not part of the norm, at least. And so this is what sentient singularity theory implies matter is it's that the mind, the mental structures beyond you are creating information streams or strings that are, and that because it's beyond you, and that coherence must be maintained. And there's a hierarchy to these minds. You're inside of a mind that is in control of you. The thoughts in that mind dictate your world. And that in this framework of a hierarchy, it allows for us to make sense of matter. And it provides a coherent framework that explains why you can't just think that water bottle into forks and knives. You have to melt it down, and you have to mold it into forks and knives. You can't just be like, or use a wand or something like you can't just, you have to actually change it in a way that maintains the coherence of that string of information in the system. Not just for you, but for everyone beyond you. And particularly for everyone beyond you. And what's important about this, though, is that even in this framework, a hierarchy is necessary in order to have a coherent model. And the question that has been coming up, though, is in these metaphysics and physics discussions is what is the world? Is it matter, or is it consciousness or / ideas? And this isn't the right question, because it is matter. Matter is, you could say, matter is what matters. I call that an extra arithmetic symmetry, or it's like a synchronicity almost. There's information that's just like beyond this individuated circumstance. Matter is what matters. That is what matter is. Like super literally, that's what it is. And that's fascinating, because it just shows that we're chasing our tail when we ask what if the universe is matter versus consciousness. In sentient singularity theory, matter is a perspective of information in a mind. Okay? Within the context of a nested hierarchy. And this means it's stupid to ask the question, like, what is the universe, matter versus mind? It depends on your definition of matter. It's mind, but matter is the information system of the structure of the minds that you're within. And so you can't override it, because it overrides you. And so in this framework, it implies that it's not, the divide can't be, is it matter or is it mind? Because there's no conflict here. This isn't we haven't figured out what matter is. So this shows that we need to define the problem better. And I hope that this is, maintaining some coherence. And then the next, a few weeks ago we had this question of what is it deism or is it theism? And that if we are in a mind, and you're just assuming that, okay, for the sake of this, then is the right perspective to take on this deism versus theism? And by the way, for anybody who is new to this, when I say theism, I'm not implying a specific religion. I personally believe that all the major world faiths, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, like Sikhism, these are all true theological traditions. I don't have any problem with any of them. They all have cultural narratives that humans have corrupted to some degree, all of them, and they all contain super literal truth, I believe, and scriptures that are wise beyond humanity. And so, given that, when I say theism, I just mean you're inside a mind, and when you look up the difference between deism and theism, you don't get anything that's really consistent, and you don't get anything that is very important either when you do look into the differences, other than it seems to generally imply that one of them is God, or the initial mind, the singular initial mind that is responsible for creating all other minds within itself, is either concerned with humanity or unconcerned. And sentient singularity theory seems to imply that any partitioning of sentience from the initial sentience is an intentional free will choice by the initial sentience. So it is not something that ever happens by accident. Maybe our accident, but not God's accident. And that implies that he is concerned. And there's so many other reasons why God would be concerned with every partition of sentience, every sentient singularity that has been partitioned by God and or created. That he is concerned with them all, not just with humans, but with all of them. If atoms are sentient, he is concerned with them. If cells are sentient, he is concerned with them. He is concerned with birds. He is concerned with mice. He is even concerned with mosquitoes, which I don't understand. But he is. He understands. I don't. And I say he because he is above us in a hierarchy, and gender is helps orient within a hierarchy. It just does, and that is just the reality of what gender is. I've gotten into gender in the past, and you can watch other streams that I've done on it. But gender is a necessary and probably the most beautiful part of creation, and it's just it transcends just humans and animals. It flows into atoms even, and so what is the divide is the question. It's not materialism versus idealism. It's not mind versus matter. So what is it? And I don't even think it's theism versus deism. I think that this one though does hint at the difference. But the problem is that it doesn't really show the scope of the divide that is the actual divide. The actual divide is in this idea of concern with humanity and us being concerned with this being. It's about, do you believe in a hierarchy in a relational hierarchy? This is the divide. And because if you ask people who are in often what is described as the New Age community or something like that, and I was watching some interviews that were with some of them, and I've said this in the past, and I remember watching Kurchai Mungal's interview with Leo Gura, and I did a 7-hour stream on it, and his original stream was 7 hours too, so it makes sense. But I was really struggling in that because he's saying a bunch of things that are true, but I could tell that there's something different about my perspective versus his. And this is not a judgment at all. It's not my place to judge, but I am going to just use this as an example. I'm not going to say that we shouldn't judge actions, because it's kind of a requirement for us to judge actions. You can't orient and navigate in the world without making judgments on actions, but it's not our place to judge people individually, but we need to make judgments on actions. This is what I'm going to get at in a minute, is that, and that's part of the divide, is that even among the people who would concede that this is about, that consciousness is fundamental, and that they'll act in some ways like the universe is sentient, or they'll say things like the universe wants to give you what you want, and it's all God, and you're God, and I'm God, and your dog is God, and this is all true. But there seems to be a difference in approach of what two different perspectives seem to think that this implies. And one of them is that of kind of a concrete moral truths in a way, and one, or of a relationship of submission, and the other one is more similar to what what we would describe as a materialist would would approach reality, it's their relationship with reality, which is that this is a system to be hacked. It's not a relationship of where it's our job to submit, in a way, and that we are inside of a someone is really what it comes down to. And if you're inside of someone, then it means like recognizing that someone is above you and more important than you. But that doesn't make you not important, because that person, and it is, by person I don't mean human, I just mean someone. Okay, a someone, a sentient being. Your dog is a someone. I'm a someone. That bird chirping outside too early in the morning, that is someone. But the mosquitoes that I don't like are even someones. But they, versus a water bottle is something. You're also something, but the difference is this is just something, and you're something and someone. And so that's the difference. But reality is a someone. And when you think about this, and you recognize that reality is a someone, it's not just a maze to figure out. It's not just a system to hack. It's someone to enter into a relationship with, and who is in charge of you. It doesn't mean that they force you to do what they want, but it means that what they want will be done, and that you can choose to go along with it or not, and you can choose to help or not. It's like your boss at work. They can't force you to do anything, but if you don't do it, you're going to be fired. It's an interesting choice of words, considering the context that we're discussing. It's another extra arithmetic symmetry, I guess. But this is the divide. Do you think of how you should approach reality as, I should try and figure out what God or the universe existence, sentient someone existence wants, and then try and help with that? Or not? And versus, how can I bend reality to fit my will? And you will see this type of narrative in a lot of the New Age type of circles. It's not always, but I'm just saying, like, it's common, just being honest, where, manifestation is quite often talked about and things like that. And I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but I'm just saying, is it the right way to approach things is to focus on what you want? You should focus on what you want, but like in the context of what God wants. And I remember like listening to people like Leo Gura, and I was listening to what's his name recently, very popular podcast, and I forgot what his name is, but I'm terrible with names. I'll remember after this story. And this is not to single out any one of them. This is just, I'm giving an example. And by the way, I might be wrong. I don't watch these people's content regularly, but just with what I've seen, and but I'm trying to give you some examples. And here's the thing also, and I want to say this, is like, I don't think God judges us very much and this is just me saying my thoughts on it. I might be wrong too on this, but if you're not aware of what is right and wrong in a certain circumstance, truly, then I don't think God judges you for it. So I'm not judging anyone for even if they're doing something that I think is wrong. If they don't, then that's between them and God, and I don't think necessarily they're going to be judged very harshly for it either if they truly don't think it's wrong. If they truly think it's wrong and they're doing it, then like, that's different. But I'm still not my place to judge, so I'm not. But when you listen to Leo Gura say things like, we are God, you are God, I'm God. That's true. You're a piece of God. But you're also in a hierarchical relationship with God. This is the part that I don't hear in a lot of these discussions. So I'm not saying Leo Gura is wrong. He's not. But it's incomplete. And it does matter to even the next stage of physics. It matters to all stages of physics. It matters to biology. It matters to physics. It matters to morality. It matters to politics. It matters to economics. If you don't go with what God wants, then you are going to fail eventually. But I'm not saying I know what God wants, but I'm saying that we should try and figure it out. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying this is what God wants and you better do it. But I do have my thoughts on it. But I am going to say that that's not, my thoughts on it are not the point. You have to think about your own thoughts and your own beliefs on this and just be honest. And that's all that any of us should, really aspire for, is honesty and kindness. And but I don't see as part of these discussions, even though they are not discussions in which these people, if you ask Leo Gura, are you a materialist? He'd probably say no. And I don't think that this is the right question anymore. Like, I get the sentiment. But if you believe that all is mind and that your thoughts impact reality, which they do, and your feelings impact reality, which they do, but you just believe that we should, and I'm not saying Leo Gura believes this, I'm just saying that some people do believe this who are not materialists, that it's still just a system to be hacked and manifested and things, and you're not thinking about what this sentient system wants, this being I call God, the initial sentience, then you're not getting it. Like, this being has feelings. According to sentient singularity theory, all there is fundamentally is sentience, which sentient beings have feelings. It's not just an information processing system where you're inside a computer and you're God who forgot he's God and this God computer exists. None of this is false, but it's not complete. We must, if we're going to understand the truth of nature of reality, I think that we need to take, I don't even think, according to sentient singularity theory and my work on it, this is what I think is true. It's not just like I don't think that there's any way for this not to be true. It's really how much I believe this. Is that this being has feelings, and those feelings matter to your reality, to my reality, to our reality, more than like anything else. And that is a very interesting divide. Is this a system to be hacked, or is it a being to be kind of obeyed? And I think that this even matters to. It's interesting because you'll hear all these people say things when they go into, a lot of them do a lot of ayahuasca and DMT and things like that. And like I've said before, I always wanted to try DMT because I saw that there was something true there, because everybody's saying the same thing, even though I didn't understand what they were saying. I had like a sober DMT experience while thinking about the universe once in the shower, and I was totally sober. And it was amazingly clean and coherent, and I'm not going to get into it in this video, but right now. Probably, but I have no desire to do DMT anymore or any drugs. I don't think that you need mind. I know now that you don't need mind altering substances in order to get a glimpse at reality, and I think that a lot of times using these substances is not it's not coherent to our culture unless you literally come from, a culture of being a tribe in the Amazon, drinking ayahuasca. I don't think drinking ayahuasca has the cultural deep information that you need to have this coherent experience and come out of it having a true perspective. And I've said this before, is like, I think that using these drugs just to take a peek at reality, it's like breaking into the White House versus being invited. You're going to see all kinds of things when you're in the White House, and you might gain some insights about how it works, and even maybe who is in charge. But like, you don't know what they want. Whereas like, if you're invited, they might tell you what they want. Otherwise, why are they inviting you? Other than to show you or tell you what they want. You know, they're like, if the president calls you in, there's no way that you're not going to know within that encounter of what's going on and what they're going to have a relationship with you in that experience, versus you broke into the Oval Office and like opened some drawers and maybe saw the president sitting there, and then, I don't know, wish taste out. But like, that's not going to give you that much information. You're not going to leave and act differently. That's what I'm trying to get at. You're not going to leave that experience and act differently. Probably. Versus if you're invited and he tells you, this is what I want, and then you leave, you're probably going to act differently. And I see a lot of the culture of taking, you know, drugs to, especially to see that reality, these, you know, you'll hear Joe Rogan talk about it, you'll hear Leo Guru talk about it, you'll hear constantly people talk about it, your friends will talk about it. And I've had friends that told me about it, and they took DMT, and they come out and they're like, man, I just realized like it's not all matter the way that we think it is. Like, there's way more to reality than just what we think of as and perceive normally as matter. And also I realized we're all connected, and I'm part of you and you're part of me, and we're all just one. And none of this is false. But none of them usually end up changing their moral perspective on the world, even disregarding like behavior, but their perspective on behavior. You know, humans are flawed. We do what we know is wrong. But do you know it's wrong? And there doesn't seem to be that much of a change after this. It's you know, you go to Burning Man or something, and I've never been to Burning Man, so I don't know, but I know people that have been to Burning Man, and I've heard a lot about it. And I would describe it as, it sounds like a hedonistic, like, giant party. That's what it sounds like. And I'm not saying nothing good comes of the going to Burning Man. I don't know. Like I said, I've never gone. I have no plans on going. But it doesn't seem like the same culture as a mosque. When you walk into a mosque, it's a very different culture than it is going to Burning Man. But if you ask both people, they would tell you that if you ask them, is existence, you know, consciousness, and are we all connected and all one? They would both be like, yeah. But there's fundamental difference in how they are approaching this and acting. And this is the divide. It's not materialism versus idealism. It's like theological relationism versus mechanism, almost. It's like, is this world here for your will, or is it here for God's will? And the reality is both, but it's primarily here for his will. You know, you have desires and things like that, and interests, and that were intentionally given to you. I have, you know, geckos and snakes and a ukulele here, and like model airplanes, and like whatever is I have tons of interests, and it's not that, you know, you have those interests for a reason, but they're not there for this, as long as they are not overriding of God's interests, is what I'm saying. Like, when people say the universe wants to give you what you want, whatever it is, it's not whatever it is. It's whatever it is, as long as it's not violating and it's within what also God wants. And that's the divide. It's like an incompleteness versus, I would say, a more complete view. And because one of them is recognizing of the sovereign sentience of existence, and the other one and the hierarchical, intrinsically hierarchical relationship between you and this other sentient being. And that's a huge difference. Just because one materialism believes in hacking reality through melting down metal and alone, and doesn't believe in manifestation, but people who believe in practice manifestation believe obviously in you can melt down metal, but you could also manifest, your plans of your life, which I'm not saying that's false. It's not false. It has limits. I will say it has limits, but that's not false. Neither one of these is truly different. The difference is, do we do this within the context of recognizing that there is a higher, that we're in a relationship with a higher being that has feelings and its own plans, and that we should kind of make our plans within those plans, not outside those plans. And I don't know exactly the right language to describe this, because I don't think that we have really drilled this down. But I think that this is the true divide. And this difference seeps into it transcends everything that we do, even physics. It's not limited to prayer or something. It transcends into making fission power plants, or doing gene editing, or how we vote, or how we structure governments, what we do with our money, like how we approach relationships with the opposite sex. Like this, it impacts everything. And I really want to make a specific video about this, but I also wanted to touch on it here and get your thoughts on it a bit. I'm gonna take a look at the chat in a minute, but this, I think, is the divide. And I think that part of orienting, these 4 primary perspectives. Let me pull them up. These 4 primary perspectives, the point of them is to help you orient in relationships with other beings, essentially, which is orientation within that in systems of multiplicity that are beyond relativity, where there's hard lines, essentially. It's not a spectrum. There's hard lines. It's to help you orient within systems of hard lines. Fundamental systems. Relationship systems. You and the relationships with the people in your life, and with God, and with the cells in your body, and with everything that is fundamental, which is everyone. It's not everything. And these 4 primary perspectives, that's their job. That's the point of them, is that they are the manifold. It is the manifold that allows for you to orient in fundamentality. I don't want to say objectivity, because even that is used in multiple ways. But within fundamental relationships. And this even can be applied to this problem, and it would imply that there's 2 degrees of freedom. Not 4, not 3, 2, actually. And in any perspective that we take, we can break it into 4, and there's a way of doing that. And you can say, it's the traditional kind of materialism approach, or where this is like random, essentially, and we're not inside, or the consciousness comes from unconsciousness, versus unconsciousness coming from consciousness, but on one side, and then you've got deism versus theism on the other, or something, which is like God, it's all consciousness, but God is concerned with us versus God is unconcerned with us. But the fundamental divide really is like, are you concerned? And it doesn't, I would say yes, God is definitely concerned with us, but you can logically deduce that that's true. And if you put in the rigor, I think that is the inevitable implication. But if you want to know, you don't even have to get that far really to start down this, because you're looking from your perspective. The question shouldn't be first, should God be concerned with you necessarily, but maybe it should just be, should you be concerned with God? When we're going to try and figure out warp transportation through geometric unity or something like that, should we think about whether or not that's God's will? Not because we're worried about hurting God necessarily, or like killing God or something like that. I don't know, because logically, any existence is an enclosed information system that it always must exist. So like, there's no way to end God, but like, you can hurt you can make more work for God in his plans. It's like your mom you're a little kid, your mom asks you to clean your room. Should you clean it? If you don't clean it, what's going to happen? Your mom's going to clean it. Maybe you'll be punished, but like, your mom's going to clean it. The room's going to get clean. Maybe you will be punished, maybe you won't, but like, the room's going to get clean. Maybe it's just best to clean the room. Maybe not because she's going to punish you if you don't. Maybe you will be punished, maybe you won't. But maybe just because she's done so much for you and brought you here and birthed you and taken care of you and fed you all your life, maybe it'd be nice to just clean your room for her. And this is how we should think about reality. And not trying to get too much into right now unless it comes up in the questions, what those individual things are, what I think they are. So I do have my own thoughts on them. But I'm just trying to highlight the perspective differences here. And that's it. So I didn't say any of this to single anyone out. I think we all need to do what is true, what we think is true, and we should all just be honest about what we think that is, and that's it. And but I obviously, I'm trying to give examples without seeming like I'm judging, because that's not my goal. But not judging people is what I'm saying. But I was listening to this big podcaster, and he was talking about going to Burning Man or doing ayahuasca or something with some shaman, and he's not from an Amazonian tribe, this guy, and there seems to be a huge difference in moral perspective in many ways that I think are kind of litmus tests for certain things, between him and I. And I was wondering, like, how can we have this when you're saying things like this guy went on to say such detail as to have met Christ during these ayahuasca journeys, and we have a huge moral difference in how we approach certain topics morally, and not entirely, obviously, like basis of there's a basis of certain things that are there, but not the end result is not the same. And I was just trying to think about, like, why is this? And I think it comes down to this relationship versus tool mentality. Is the universe a tool for you, or is it someone that you're supposed to have as a relationship with, versus something that is a tool? This is what I mean by, like, of course it's something that it is a tool. Of course it is. That's not wrong. So when people say that, they're not wrong. This is why it's tough to talk about this thing, because as soon as you say that's wrong, it's obviously not wrong. It's obviously true. But there's more to the story. And it's more to the story is more fundamental, which is, yeah, it's a thing that's a tool. But it's also a someone. I am a thing that is a tool to my spouse, and vice versa. I do the dishes. That's like I am like a tool. But at the same time, like there's a relationship that's like backing that action as well. And I'm called to catch spiders and kill flies and things like that. And it's like, yeah, that you're acting as something that's a tool, but this is also a relationship more fundamentally. Why are you doing these things? And same thing with our relationship with the universe or existence or God. There has to be that backing of recognizing the someoneness, the sovereign sentience of this initial being, this eternal being, and versus just kind of ignoring, even considering that it has its own feelings and goals, and yes, it loves you, and no matter, I'm not going to say no matter what, because it's not my place to say that, but like, if you're here, love is an action, okay? Like, if you're here, then that's an act of love. But a lot of acts of love to get you here to watch this right now. But and we should think about that. Maybe we should also love that being back. So, anyways, to the chat. Nice. Did you happen to catch any of Roy Dobson's stream today? I did not yet. I will watch it. I've spoken to Roy on once on a panel on theories of nothing. I think was the channel that it was on. It's on I think a couple channels, but that's one of them. That was my first time catching one of his streams. His stream was kind of like AMA's meditation. It was pretty cool. That's good. Yeah, Roy and I have had some discussions, and we seem to be aligned on a lot of things. I usually use the word consciousness, but I think sentience is a more correct word when referring to the inner world of a being. It is. It's more specific. Sentience is more specific than consciousness. And it's also, that specificity is very important. This is why hydrocarbon plastics are so interesting. Plastic fork go in, plastic fork get dismembered, liquid goo pass through injection heater, 3D print plastic fork, repeat until end of time. Yeah, I think about that. I want to get a 3D printer. My goal was to get one by the end of last year. Now it's to get one by the end of this year. And I don't know if I'll do that. The problem with it, and this is why I keep postponing getting a 3D printer, is the technology seems to be moving very quickly. And it's like camera technology. Every year it gets way better, and the price for that capability comes down. So 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I wanted a 3D printer, but I was like, I'm going to wait, because eventually they're going to get so cheap and the capability is going to be so much better. And also the usability is going to be so much better. 20 years ago, you probably needed to be a coder to use a 3D printer. And now it's like you just press a button in certain circumstances. Not exactly, but there is a skill set that is not, that I know is a learning curve because I watch videos about it. But it's not, it's something that's getting to the point where everybody can use it. It's like using a printer, Even that doesn't always go as planned these days. Even still, people have problems with printers. But what's up, Justin? This is why. Okay, yeah. The word you are looking for is not judgment, but assessment. I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but I get what you're saying, I think. Yeah, but yeah, that's not a bad way of thinking about it, necessarily. What's up, memes? By the way, I did an awesome interview with Memes of Destruction. We had a great talk. It is linked in the description below if you want to check it out. It was a good time. I also posted it onto this channel, but you should watch it on his channel and subscribe to his channel. It's very good. Although I've heard people say, the DMT entities say, "We've been waiting for you," or McKenna say, they said to him after not tripping for a while, something like, "You send so many but visit so seldomly." Interesting. I totally believe that this happens, by the way, but I don't know. People are like trying to figure out always, are they demons or are they angels, or is it God or is it Satan? Is it aliens? Is it I don't know, some other beings. But I think that it's important to look at the context in which you got to them, and was it the right time, or did you go when you shouldn't have necessarily? And the difference, I think that, I remember I've told this story before, and I'll just tell it, but I always wanted to do DMT, and it was the last drug that I wanted to try. I don't do drugs, but I went to college, and I tried things while I was in college many moons ago. It was like a decade ago at this point. But the last one that I had not done by the time that I had graduated college that I wanted to try, there's plenty of drugs that I have not tried. I have not tried heroin or anything like that. But like, I have no desire to try them, so that wasn't the point. But I did always want to try DMT because people said that so many interesting things about it, and I could tell that there was something coherent about what they were saying. And I've never tried it, and never will at this point, I don't think, and no desire to do that. But I was once in the shower, and I was just washing my hair, and I was thinking about the universe right at the right before this project kind of started, about probably a couple of years before this project started, and I was thinking about how, like, we're inside of, basically, that this is like a self-simulating, nested universe, essentially, where we reach a technological singularity and it simulates, which is really a recreation of another universe within itself, and that this happens again and again and again and again, and it follows the same pattern basically every time. And I was thinking about this, and it just like clicked in my head how this just made sense. And because I was focusing on AI, I was trying to understand AI at the time, and the simulation hypothesis that Elon Musk talks about. And all of a sudden I was like, I had an out-of-body experience. I mean, it was like, it seemed like a DMT experience, but it was way cleaner. And I came back from this unable to speak about it for like 2 years, and without crying. And I was like, right after it happened, I just wept on the floor of, the shower for like a while. And the message that I got from this was just like, I'm showing you this because you're ready to see it. It was I saw exactly what I was envisioning. That was the point. I didn't gain any new information. It was just like I was shown, you're right. You got it, like, basically. And that's it. So I didn't come back with anything that I hadn't already left with. But the connection of this and the statement that was stated to me, and the message that I received of just, I'm showing you this because you're ready to see it. That was it. That was nothing else. Like, has so much wisdom to it. And it's just that everything is about context. And if you there are things that we are ready for that at a certain point in our life, and if we got it at that moment, it'd be a good thing because we'd understand what was happening. But if we had that experience at that moment, we would not understand what was happening, and it would probably be bad for us, but not necessarily good, at least. you would not understand. And this is what I think happens when people do a lot of like these hallucinogenic drugs to have these experiences with entities beyond what is normally physically perceivable. Is you end up sneaking into the White House and you leave with no instructions. Or maybe you read something that was top secret that you weren't supposed to read, and it's like you read the first page of a 50-page report and you don't know really what's going on, but you think you do. And that's not a good thing either. And versus if the president invites you to the White House to tell you something, you're going to leave feeling like you should act differently, at least in a specific circumstance. Maybe it shouldn't change your entire moral perspective probably, but the point is that if that's God that we're talking about and not the president, then yeah, it should change your entire moral perspective. And I talked to so many friends of mine that had done DMT, and they were like, yeah, it'll change your life, man. It will change your life. You will see that we're all one, and it's just, I am you and you are me, and we're the universe who forgot it was God, and we're all God. And I'm like, I know you before this, and I know you after this, and you haven't changed at all. Not in and I'm not even talking about your actions, but even how you view your actions, you haven't changed. A lot of times people become more hedonistic. And it's because they break free of the dogmas that they held before, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but because it shows that they didn't really understand these dogmas that they held before, which is a good thing to understand that you didn't understand. But there's nothing new that they do understand. So it's like hedonism fills the void that's now been created. And I was talking to this other guy once, and whereas like me, my entire moral perspective has shifted. My perspectives on marriage and modesty and politics and even like approaches to nuclear physics and all kinds of and gene editing and moral, like much more traditional moral questions, they've all changed since this moment. And it's been an across-the-board change for me. And I remember talking to this guy once, and he was the first person that I ever heard say the word theophany, which is exactly what I would describe that I had. And he told me once that he was a drug addict, and he was just a friend of a friend that I met like maybe once or twice. And but he told me once this story. We got like into like deep discussions about this, and he told me once that he was a drug addict, and that once he was like just, I don't know, at some party, and then I don't know what drugs he was doing, or if he was even doing drugs at the moment, but he told me that all of a sudden a voice spoke to him, and he just knew it was God, and it like said to him basically something like, I love you, but do you love you? Like, and something like that. And that guy, cold turkey, quit drugs and partying that moment and forever on, as far as I'm aware. But what's important is that his perspective on it shifted, because at the time, like, he wasn't really against it, but like he had this moment. And it just changed his entire worldview. Because if you don't believe that that's the best a very good path to go down, I'm not just talking about addiction. I'm talking about like just partying, like, and I don't mean partying as far as having a good time. I mean like hedonism. Then that's a transcendent moral perspective shift. It's not just I don't think I should, play beer pong so much, or like I don't think I should drink anymore. It's like, it was not that type of thing. It was like an entire, he was like, I want to get married, like it was very different. And, sorry, my dogs are barking. That doesn't happen when people just do DMT very often. I'm not saying it never does, but I actually think it can in these like tribes, in the Amazon where people do like ayahuasca. But that's because they have this whole lore and culture and evolutionary history even with this action that we don't. Kurchai Mungel has said this a few times, and I think he's right. There's something very like deeply profound about this that he said, and it was like, when you do, he said that I've noticed that when a lot of people in the West adopt traditions from the East, like Buddhism or meditation and Hinduism, it's not that meditation is not a Western thing. It's just within the context of the metaphysics of West, more like the Abrahamic traditions usually. And but when they adopt these Eastern traditions, faith traditions, they tend to be like hollowed out and missing a lot. And he said that it's like running Windows on a Mac or running Mac on a Windows. And it's just not there. It's not going to do it. Versus if you run Apple on a software on a Mac, it's going to work really well, much better. Versus running software that was designed for different hardware. And it's that we have this whole cultural background with one tradition, well, not necessarily one tradition, but like a string of traditions versus a different string of traditions. And in one of my Discord discussions, I remember somebody had said something like, about polytheism and how like Hinduism is polytheism or something like that. And I was like, if Hinduism is true, which I think that it is, then it's not actually polytheism. It's that our Western kind of hollowed out view that's missing all this history and culture and evolutionary relationship, ship basically with this tradition is missing all this information. And I bet you if you had that information, you would not see this as a tradition with a bunch of different gods, because by definition, you can't even have a bunch of different gods. It's the highest being. Even if we think about like Greek tradition, it's I bet you even this is and we're like, that's polytheism. I bet even that got watered down over time, and then we started calling it polytheism. And it's because of translation problems, essentially, and also lack of context. And I looked it up, and I found, is Hinduism polytheistic? In some sense, Hinduism appears as polytheistic. However, various gods and goddesses are viewed strictly as embodiments of the divine Brahman. So the system is monotheistic. This is what I got. Like, as the number one, right there, you can see it. Okay? And that's exactly what I expect. And it just shows that there is a huge amount of importance to having a historical context and an evolutionary history and a cultural, I guess, tradition that is all based in this, all coherently connected, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And it's funny because when we look at the Buddhism or Hinduism in the West, a lot of people who don't have this, I'm not going to just say deep knowledge, like academic knowledge. I'm going to say you need that historical, evolutionary, cultural history and coherence to your entire, beingness in your relationship with it. Then it seems like people will say that Buddhism is non-theistic almost, which I think is also false. And it's just that we're lacking the context of all of this. And same thing with when people say Hinduism is polytheistic. It's like, no, it's not. That's impossible. And it's impossible for even us to feel to not have a hierarchy in our own understanding. Even if you make fame your god, which is totally idolatry, obviously, but it's an idolatry that is practiced everywhere. We literally have a show in every country called American Idol, and it's literally about becoming famous. Or, you know, I don't know, Australian Idol or whatever it is. Like, these shows are literally about becoming famous. It's like straight in your face idolatry. And I'm not saying that going on the show is necessarily idolatry, but it's the whole show is around this idolatrous idea, and it's which is placing as the highest in the hierarchy of your priorities something that should not be there. It's really placing as the highest. You know what idolatry is? It's placing as the highest in your priorities someone that is not the actual highest in the hierarchy, or it is placing something there that is not the someone that is the highest in the hierarchy. That's what idolatry is. That's the adult, true version of idolatry. And it's not, you know, having little like figurines that you pray to in your, you know, closet, like people think of as idolatry when they read, you know, the Bible. But it's like worshiping the stock market is idolatry. It's funny because like there's a giant golden bowl in front of it, which is like the symbol for Moloch. And it's in the Bible. They construct this golden bowl idol. And it's like, we did that. It's in New York City. Like, it's this, the Bible is what happens. And all of these traditions have their scriptures about what happens. Buddhism has it. Hinduism has it. It's not that you need to pick only one that is the true one, but you should follow the one that has the historical, cultural coherence that is, you know, intertwined with your being. And that's not using a shaman from South America who gives you ayahuasca in a yurt. And I've stayed in a yurt and it's fine, but that's not like this. That's obviously like not what I'm talking about. It's that's not gonna give you enough, because there's no historical backing to it. But when you see people in the West adopt these like Eastern cultures, it tends to be adopted in this like hollowed out weird way where like all of a sudden you start like wearing Eastern clothes, and which is there's no problem with that, but it's like it's not part of your tradition the same way. Like, you don't know what this even if you think you know what this is about, like, it doesn't mean the same thing to you. And you know, it ends up being this like meditation a lot, and you know, there's not a real like difference in like moral perspective other than maybe being kinder to animals or something like that. But like that comes from any exploration of your own consciousness, I think. And that's not really the truth of these cultures. When you look back at these faith traditions from all over the world, it doesn't matter which one it is. They all have this very similar viewpoint of like modesty and marriage and family, and these are the perspectives that come through. You look at Sikhism, and it's like you grow a beard if you're a man, and you are the protector and provider. And literally, you are instructed in Sikhism to carry a weapon with you at all times for the sake of defense of others and yourself. Like, this is not different from the lore that we have in other faith traditions. You know, it's like, you know, in Christianity, it's like, if you have a cloak and not a sword, sell your cloak and get a sword. You know, but like, you know, and this is obviously, I'm very much summarizing, but like that is the general message, is like, you know, protect people, basically, you know, be able to, at least, and be competent to some degree, but within the scope of everything else. It's not just about that. You know, you can turn that into an idol worship, and I've seen that. And but it's just it's important to recognize that context is key. Context, people say like, it's funny because this is where I'm going with this, to bring this all back around full circle a little bit. In this Clearwin video where they're like, matter is energy, and oh no, it's not energy, it is information. Oh, it's not information, it's energy. Energy is information. You know what information is? It's context. And because people will say there's information in context and information outside of context. No, there's not. Context is information. What is fundamental context? It's relationships between sentient beings. That's what it is. There's no coherence to information or energy or matter or anything outside of that. And this is where you're starting to like really drill down, I think, to how to perceiving the true structure of the world that we're in, which is a someone and a relationship that we have with that someone. And it's funny. I was listening to this clip of this scientist who went on Lex Fridman recently, and I might end up doing a stream on his entire conversation, but I haven't listened to it yet. I've only listened to like 5 minutes of this 15-minute clip or something, and I don't even know who it is. So we'll talk about it more another time. But he said something that intrigued me and made me want to watch the entire interview, and I don't remember who it was, but maybe we'll look it up actually. But is this scientist talking about how like theism is not inconsistent with science, and he said that that praying and focusing on God and talking to God allowed him to see himself much more clearly than just meditation or something like that. Because you have like, Sam Harris is very focused on meditation, but like, I just being honest, like there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of orientation there as to what direction to focus on. Where is north? And I think Sam Harris tries harder to understand the world than almost anybody else that I look at, which is why like I really hope that he develops a relationship with God one day, because that would be amazing. And because he is somebody who tries really hard, I think, but I just believe that like he doesn't know where his compass is pointing, like, but he's focused on trying to find his way. Like I respect that, but I just think that if you're lost, you're lost. And that happens to a lot of people. It's not just him, but he just tries really hard, and so like it's more okay to use him as an example, because it's like a praising example, even though I seriously disagree with a lot of things that he says, but that's because I think he's lost. It's not because I think he is, not trying. He talks about meditation often, but it's like, it doesn't, like, what is it doing? Yeah, it helps. Like in certain moments you can realize like, okay, my thoughts right now are just not, they're like automatic, and I need to regain control of myself. And that's a good thing. And I do think that like he seems pretty good at that, or he seems to speak very well to it, at least. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to make a judgment on whether or not he's good at it. I don't know him. But like, he seems to speak well to like what this can do. I don't even know what meditation means, but it just being self-reflective. Okay. And trying to like really focus on like what your mind is doing. But when we see that this doesn't really like help you orient anywhere other than just like recognize what's going on in your own mind, but it doesn't help you figure out what you should do. It just helps you maybe control yourself, but like to what ends? And that's, I think, a very key thing too, is figuring out like what's the ends. And but this guy was talking about this. He was like, yeah, prayer was really helped me see myself. And I was like, yeah, that's very true. Like, that's the difference. It's not because I remember Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson were talking once in their like debate that never went anywhere famously, and Jordan Peterson's like, if you kneel down in your bed and you ask, you say to yourself, God, I am struggling with this or something like that, and he's basically describing prayer. And Sam Harris is like, that sounds like meditation. But it's not. Because one of them is about you're speaking to a being beyond you. The other one is just about speaking to yourself. And if there's no being beyond you, then there isn't a leader in the situation. It's just a dog chasing its own tail. And maybe he catches his tail, but like, what's the point of that? And that is kind of how I see like how meditation is thought of as in the West. A lot of times, I remember when I first started this, I was like, I have had moments of like intense, transcendent, not even focus, but like super focus. Like when I was working on these models and this work, sometimes we're like, I'm just in a flow. Musicians and artists can probably understand this better than most, but even mathematicians I've heard talk about this type of thing, and where you're just in a flow, like, and you're in the zone. You're not even thinking. You're just like observing and feeling. It's really what it is. And like, I've never called it meditation, but then I was listening to Sam Harris for so long talk about meditation, and other people talk about meditation, and I felt like they were always saying things like, clear your mind of everything. And I'm like, if I think about clearing my mind of everything, I'm just thinking about having a clear mind, which isn't there. It's still not clear. I'm thinking about something. So like, I don't understand the logic behind this. It's never made sense to me. And you know what? I think that that's because of exactly what Kurchai Mungal has basically stated, is that when we think of meditation in the West, we're like, clear your mind. There's something in translation that is just missing, because that isn't the way that the world works. If I tell you don't think about an elephant, you are thinking about an elephant. There is something to meditation, but it's not exactly what everybody in the West thinks of it as. Where you just sit there like this, and you're just like, I'm thinking about nothing. It's like, you're thinking about nothing. Like, you can't do it. And I really just think that we need to recognize that sometimes context always context is key. And when we think about, you might be missing a lot of context in if you're Western, I don't know, you're from the Europe or America, or I don't know, even the Middle East or something, and you are thinking about religion, and you're like missing something where you think that this is all nonsense, and I think that you would be missing something, because I used to think that way too. I was a self-described atheist, which is really anti-theism, and I just thought that these were like fairy tales that people told themselves to like feel comfort, and that's what I thought. But I had like a very ignorant and immature, incomplete, and I don't say immature in a judgmental way. I mean, like, just like there's a mature way of understanding something. There's an immature way of understanding something. But that's just true of everything. But that's also true of theology. And I just had an immature view of theology. I stopped learning about theology at 13, and I never really had a serious like understanding of it before that, even in that context. And it was missing pieces because at home it wasn't practiced, and I would just go into Sunday school and Hebrew school, and that was it. And like, there's nothing backing it, and so it ended up not making sense to me. But I rejected it because it also, not only did it not make sense to me, but it's telling me like, you have to do these things that you don't want to do. And also it's, it's missing something that would imply to me, all the information that would imply to me that I should do these things, even if I don't want to. And I see this exact same kind of thing happen with people in the West towards their own traditions. But at least when you view Christianity and you've never been Christian in your life, or Judaism or Islam or something, like, you understand that there is a relationship there that is like hierarchical, and it's part of the reason why a lot of people reject it so harshly if they don't have the context that backs up the hierarchy, the understanding of the hierarchy. And so they go to the Eastern traditions, and there's no hierarchy that they understand there because they're missing all the context that provides it. But at least here they understand that there is a hierarchy. But they go to these other ones and they're like, yeah, I understand. It's basically saying that it's all consciousness and we're all one, and that makes sense to me, and that's true, all of it. That's why it's so adopted. But there's no hierarchy, and it ends up just being a hollowed out version of what it really is. And it doesn't change how you think that you should be, even though in the reality of these cultures that came from, same exact values: family, modesty, marriage, treat others the way that you would want to be treated, versus hedonism with fake spirituality frosting on top, which is a lot of what it is. And this is to show this. This is an example. I was talking to my wife, and I was talking about gender and how I had seen this guy who's very big New Age type of podcaster. He talks about spirituality all the time. People will say, I'm spiritual but not religious. Everyone has a spirit. You have a mind. You have a soul. It's all the same thing. When people say, "Oh, you don't have a soul," just have you have a sense of self, though, but you have feelings, and you have your mind, but that's it. But you don't have a soul. That is a soul. And so when people say that, it just doesnand make sense. But it's coming from a lack of a misunderstanding is what it's coming from. But I was listening to this guy and I saw this clip again, different one, and it's like this guy hugging this other guy who's just weeping his eyes out, and then the caption was like, "Embracing the divine feminine," and it's like, crying is not feminine. It's not. There's nothing feminine about crying. What you cry about is sometimes more feminine or more linked to femininity or masculinity, but it's not about femininity or masculinity. Crying, this is a caricatured version of femininity that is hollowed out. It's like when you see people say this is when they're femininity is dressing in I don't know, pink and acting a certain way, and it's that's not femininity. That femininity is a relational perspective and of submission and of reactivity instead of active. You are the follower instead of the leader, basically, and you are the reactive force, not the active force, and that's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing. They're both beautiful things and necessary. And I saw this and I was like, this is this hollowed out nonsense spirituality of embracing the divine feminine. I'm just crying in the arms of another man. It's there's no context about why this is happening. It's just healing traumas of the past. This isn't doing any of that probably. And I'm not trying to judge it specifically, but I'm judging what is the commentary about it. I don't know what was going on there. They didn't say it. What they said is unrelated. But I was telling my wife that, sometimes when I'm by myself, I just will pray kneeling down completely to God, and I will, just basically tell God that, I, apologize for the things that I think I did that he wouldn't like. I thank God for the things that are in my life that I'm grateful for, and just all these things. And I usually end my prayers with help guide me, to your will more, help me get closer to my will being in alignment with your will. And it really makes me understand femininity, really, because in this relationship between me and God, I'm the feminine. Okay? In but in my relationship with my wife, I'm the masculine. But in this relationship with God, I'm the feminine. And I'm the one that their will is eventually going to be what is done. And like, there's no real way to stop that. And I have no choice really but to submit. And it is also, though, what I should do, because God is providing for me. And this is like how your wife should be with her husband. Not women should be to men, but how wives should be with their husbands. And it's a submissive relationship. It's a challenging relationship to some degree. That's how it's supposed to be. But it's also supposed to be submissive. It's like when you're the boss in a company and you go to your people and they're supposed to challenge you a little bit and be like, listen, I'm just letting you know, like, I don't think that's the best idea. And you're, as a boss, are supposed to be like, take their word into consideration and then ultimately make the decision based on what you think is right. And they're supposed to follow you even if they disagree with it. As long as you're not doing something horribly immoral. But like, let's say, it's not that. And it's just like, I think that we should go with this color on the new logo instead of this color. And it's like, I really don't think that's right. Okay, well, thank you for your input. And then you either decide to go with what they had recommended or you don't. But like, ultimately their job is to still make the logo. And this is masculine versus feminine type of relationship too. And it's funny because like I'm looking at this like embracing the divine feminine, just crying, and like this is such a caricatured, hollowed out version of femininity. Whereas like in my relationship with God as someone who has a sovereign will that is separate from mine, I can see the difference between what I want to do and what he wants to do. And sometimes what I want to do is not what what I think he would want me to do. And it's like, makes me understand femininity more. We're like, why some things are just frustrating to women or wives and things like that. It's like, because, you're two different people, but also there's a hierarchy that makes you one. That hierarchy makes you one. Without that hierarchy, there is no oneness. Because there's nothing connecting you. It's like a boss with their employees, and if their employees like, I don't think that you should make the logo that color, and the boss is like, you know what? Actually, I think that we should make the logo that color, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to do what I think is best. And your boss is like, well, what the heck is going on? Like, you have to do what I want you to do. You either do what he doesn't want you to do, in which case you're going to lose your job because there's no oneness. There's no coherence. They can't keep you. But if you do your job, then there's coherence at least, even if you end up doing the wrong color or something like that. And that's the same thing that creates oneness. You're part of the same company. But like that if you're in a marriage and like the woman is always doing something different than what the husband wants, and the husband's always not taking into consideration even what the wife wants, which you are supposed to take it into consideration. Of course you are. Then there's no oneness. That means that God is supposed to take into consideration what I want. He is. Ultimately, he's supposed to make the decision, and I'm supposed to follow it. And this helps you understand even like the trials of women. Like, it just does. And even as a man, much more deeply, you're like, I get it now. I get why sometimes you're really frustrated. And like, you're like, you can't tell me what to do. It's like, yeah, the reality is you can't. But you also, at the end of the day, like, there's consequences that they can't overcome for not doing what you don't want them to do. That's true of God. And that's also true of you and your boss. And it's also has been historically true of men and women. And I think that it still is in a metaphysical sense, but not so much in a physical sense like it has been in the past. So this is what I mean is like, without the context of recognizing some of these things, you end up with just hollowed out, empty versions that of what people just call spirituality. There's no such thing as spirituality. There's everything is you have it. You are a spirit. You don't even have a spirit. You are a spirit. If you are someone, you are a spirit. You are a mind. You don't have a mind, like I say. You are a mind. You don't have a soul. You are a soul. You don't have a spirit. You are a spirit. Like, whatever word you want to use, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. And, but you end up with this, like, this trick that happens. It's almost worse than, like, being, like, a straight up, what we would normally describe as, like, a materialistic skeptic or something like that. And where that's not good, because I think it's false. And, you want to understand what the truth of things. But it's what's worse than not understanding is, like, thinking that you do. And I get it that both sides of that do think that they do understand. But, like, one of them more, like, does think that they understand more than the other. Because at the end of the day, like, a lot of materialist skeptics will be like, well, we don't know. But, like, a lot of the people who are, in the spiritualism type of movement, they'll be like, yeah, I do know. Like, I know you're God and I'm God and everyone is God. And it's like, they're right. But, like, they don't know enough. It's not that they don't know. It's that they don't know enough. And it matters. So, back to the chat. Please hit the like button if you have enjoyed this. I'm not going to stay too much longer, but I will make sure that I get to people's questions and things. Have you heard of the idea that good explanations are hard to vary, whereas the details of the explanations cannot be interchanged with the details, and that all the details are equally relevant? No, but that sounds pretty good. So, for example, the God meme is one that is easy to vary and the details don't matter so much. You can apply it anywhere, and that is what makes it a bad explanation. I don't actually understand exactly what I think that that's because, like, of the definition of God is in a lot of discussions is not specific enough. So when I say God and somebody's like, well, which God? I already know you know nothing about this. God is the highest sentient being, the initial sentience that is the initial, like, the eternal existent mind that cannot not exist. That is what I'm talking about. It is the logical inevitability of existence that it is a sentient someone that is self-aware. And that's it. So if you say which God, I mean, like, the God. That's the answer. It's not, oh, the Muslim God or the Christian God or the Jewish God or the Hindu God. No. You might want to ask which scripture. Sure, that's a little better, but, like, it's all the same God. There's only one God. And so God, it has to be defined properly, though, as the initial and eternally existent, inevitable, sentient being that is responsible for, all the partitions of sentience within themselves. So, like, that's specific. But if you're like, it could be Zeus, it could be Brahman, it could be, Allah, or it could be, Hashem, and it's like Hashem and Brahman and Allah, they're all the same being. So, they're just different names for the same being. Aubrey Marcus, yeah, that was who I was talking about. In some cases, not in all of the examples that I gave, but Aubrey Marcus was talking about Burning Man, and I was like, I was just really, like, he was talking about Burning Man, how Burning Man isn't great anymore because, like, and I was like, whoa, like, I'm curious, like, are you, like, what's the moral, like, reason for, like, you not liking Burning Man? And he was like, oh, like, there's people that, like, stay in their motorhomes, and then there's people who are out dancing around the fire, and the people dancing around the fire are calling the people who stay in their tents and motorhomes not true burners, and there's, like, politics between, like, the people that are there with the land and the people who show up or something. And I was like, none of this is you're not referencing hedonism one time during this. And I was like, how are you talking about meeting Christ in ayahuasca, ceremonies, and you're not going to mention hedonism at all at Burning Man? Like, I'm not saying that you have to participate in hedonism to go to Burning Man. I'm just saying it's the general culture of it. It is. I would assume, at least, given all the people that I know that have gone there, all the stories that they've told me, it seems like that is the case. And all the video that I've seen and all the pictures, and like I said, I've never been there, so I don't have firsthand information that's definite on this. And I'm not saying that there aren't small segments there that are different. Probably are. But, like, I'm just saying, as much as I know, that's what I'm speaking to. I'm not speaking to, and I could be wrong, but, like, I would have to be wrong about everybody that has been to Burning Man, who's a friend of mine who has told me about it and who I trust that these stories were true. They would all have to be lying for me to be wrong about Burning Man, about the culture of Burning Man in general. And it's even interesting that it's called Burning Man. But I understand, like, why people will be like, well, no, they call it Burning Man because of this. It's like, I'm talking about extra arithmetic symmetries here. I'm talking about, like, there are messages in things that were not consciously put there by the people who came up with the message, but they were put there by God for certain people who get it to see sometimes. And I'm not saying that that's definitely one of them, but it seems like it. And there's plenty of other examples of that we can talk about at some point, but it's not even plenty. There's, like, endless examples of that. But I was expecting something about that wasn't just, like, political bickering about, like, who's the true burners and who's not, because of, like, the way in which they, like, their activities that they do there that aren't, like, morally relevant, like whether you stay in your tent or not or something. Like, if it was, like, about, like, them going there and, like, participating in certain, like, rituals versus others, having a specific message versus others, engaging in specific activities versus others, that from a moral standpoint, then sure, like, this is a very interesting observation and discussion. But, like, it's not that. It was, like, about, just, I don't know, like, it was just about cultural bickering, I guess it seemed like. And I'm not part of the crowd, so I don't know exactly all the details, but I'm just telling you, it was about, like, how you celebrate at Burning Man, but it wasn't about the moral differences in how you celebrate. It was just about, like, what kind of activities you like. And that's different. And, like, I just don't understand, like, how you can say that you met Christ, but then, like, they're not talking about, like, the culture of Burning Man a little bit. And and I'm not saying that he didn't, by the way. I actually kind of think he did, but, like, like I said before, it's like there's a difference between sneaking into the White House and meeting the president like that, and there's a difference between being invited. One of them, you're going to leave that meeting very differently than the other. One of them, you're going to leave the meeting, you're going to be like, yo, I met the president and, like, he was nice. Or I met the president, he was kind of an asshole. Versus, yo, I met the president and he told me this, and, like, he asked me to do this, and he showed me, how to do this or something. Like, it's, like, very different. And one of them is you have something to say about it. The other one is it changes everything about what how you view the world and what you're supposed to do. And that is just different. I don't know. So, like I said, I'm not judging anybody, but doesn't seem to be the same. There seems to be a pattern among people who do a lot of these, like, hallucinogens to meet entities on the other side, whether that's God or Christ or angels or demons or whatever, machine elves, aliens, like whatever is on the other side. Like people that meet them through hallucinogenic experiences with drugs tend to not change their moral perspective much in what they think is right and wrong. They tend to just, very often it like leads to like more hedonism, which is like, and it's like dressed up in a way that of like compassion. It's like hedonism is compassion. And I'm not saying there's no truth to anything that they're saying. I think that there is some, but it's just, it's consistent in as far as it can be, but like it's also not, doesn't have enough context for it to be truly consistent. It's like if you heard something about some, I don't know, if you heard some story and it implied that you should do this about it, versus you heard more to the story and it implied that doing that would actually like not be good. And they're both consistent, but one of them, like having more information changed the entire situation for you. So Aubrey Marcus equals Leo Gura plus Joe Rogan. Kind of. You love your theory, by the way. I appreciate it. Also, are the numbers in the assembly of assemblies meaningful? What do they mean? Can it theoretically be used to develop math and or technology or something like that? Yes, definitely, 100%. The numbers have intrinsic meaning in my models, and we're not going to get too deep into it because I don't have too much time, but I will show you just a little bit of like. So these values are not put in there intentionally. These are all calculating, or they are referencing, which is really sometimes reference is calculation. Sometimes it's just reference, but all of them. So the only number that I put in this, the only one, is this one. And that's it. And even this one, I had no choice in because there's only one existence. So if I delete this, every value in this changes to 0. Every single one. If I put in a 2, which it's not, but every value is calculated. And what's interesting about these models is, a lot of people, they talk about like a singular equation. And they're like, and just for the sake of math, like you asked, can this be used to create math? Yes, it is the context of mathematics. It's the context of quantities itself. That's what it is. And if you look at math, you will see that math is not, it is a helical referencing symmetrical structure. It's like a double helix in numbers. And if you really see it, and so for instance, let's look at this. These are sequences, spin sequences. And so these are the Lucas numbers, and each one's calculating off the previous, and you have the Fibonacci sequence here, and like I said before, all these are there. I'm not putting these numbers in artificially. But the Fibonacci sequence, if you look at it, you can see it's a spiral structure, especially when I move it. You can see that there is coherence, even in the way that the numbers look. It's creating some type of spiraling structure. And if you really want to see that, look at this sequence that I have here, which is just, it's a sequence that I came up with that I think is relevant to fundamental reality. And if I move it, you can see it looks like a twisting, spiraling rope. going through that. It's much easier to see here because you can see there's zeros on either side, so it frames it better. But that's because of a constraint of Excel, so this would just continue on and on and on. But because of the constraint of Excel, it actually helps us visualize the fact that this is, even if it continues on and on and on, it's like a woven pattern. You know, there's like, you can see the strings. It's fascinating. And it's because information is context. And when people talk about like equations as being fundamental, and you know, you have all these physicists trying to create a fundamental theory, they're using models that are not fundamental, and language that is not fundamental, and rules that are not necessarily fundamental, to try and make a theory that's fundamental. You can't. What's interesting about this is that not only is this equations, which, you know, and references. There's an equation. There's an equation. There's a reference. And even equations are references. But not only is it that, it's also a structure. So it's an equation that is also a structure. And you do have structure. That's why you have order of operations in mathematics. That's what gives an equation structure. And that like my theory even does show that if you look at like here, these models that show this binary triadic system of this manifold, this binary triadic manifold. It's this like 6-dimensional manifold system structure that we see everywhere that we look. You know, look at the senses, and you look at space-time, and you look at language, and you look at questions with who, what, where, why, and you know, how. This is a 6-dimensional manifold. You can even see this in the mathematical order of operations: parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And this is how allows you to orient, because there's a hierarchy here, that one, and then that one, and then there's this binary aspect: addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, parentheses and exponentiation, which is really like concatenation or like grouping, containing versus expanding. Basically, this is like containing, expanding. Brilliant. Okay, that's brilliant, actually. Okay, so what's interesting is that in these models, you're not just getting values, which they do matter, and you can see them there, you can see them here. I've talked about, if you look at like the 4th video I think I ever put up on this channel, you can watch this, and I explain like what 42 seems to imply, what 33 seems to imply in these values. And this is all calculated. This is the model this is what I think they mean. This is like, or what I think they mean is what I think is an explanation of what I think they mean, and this is the values. And this is all calculative too. And so, you know, it's not random. And you can watch that video to see, but I didn't try and get any of these values. They just were. And that's the way it should be. But it's not just an equation, it's also a structure to this equation. And I think that if I was a math major or a physics major, I think I would actually have an even harder time doing this, because I would try and use the skills and the language and the models and the context of what I learned in academic training to build my model. But what if you couldn't just, with an equation that is utilizing only symbolism, which is numbers and letters and algebra and things like that, but you also needed like a broader context. You needed to build not just the the information, but the structure that the information was contextualized within at the same time. And that is what this is. I started with 1 here, and I was trying to figure out how do I get information, grow information. And so I was multiplying it and adding it at the same time and symmetrically, and like that's what you end up with is this thing. And it kind of just seems to end in this self-reflective endpoint. And then I used it to grow, there's one, and there's another one. It's the same exact structure as was before. And it gives context to all these numbers. And what's interesting is that this also showed me the context of mathematical operations. So if you think about the order of operations in mathematics, and you think about a structure of multiplicity that's starting from a singularity and growing by going to 2 and then 3 and 4 and 5, it's just growing. What you get is you get exponentiation, and you get which is growing and containing is really what you get. You get growing and containing. As it grows, it is all that is growing in it is also contained within it, because you have one existence that you start with, and then you're creating multiple existences within it, which is multiple. You have one someone that's creating multiple someones within it, just like you are someone with multiple someones within you, which are your cells, and they have someones within them, which is molecules, and then atoms, and etc. And God, we are that within God, so it's growing and containing. God is growing and containing all simultaneously. But there's 2 perspectives on this. Is God growing, multiplying existence, or is he containing all existence? It's both. He's exponentiating and parenthesing. And but also, if you think about multiplication and addition, which within the growth structure that I have here, what I think is multiplication is like moving along these from here to here, or from here to here. So like the different types of cells, one cell moving to different types of cells, all these single-celled organisms of different kinds, yeast, E. coli, whatever, like going from here to here, that's differentiation. Then you've got here organisms, and you've got birds or fish and birds and people and whatever, like dogs and cats and all these different like beings within here. But then you have this jump from here to here, or from cells to organism, to multicellular organism. And so this, I think, is addition, essentially. So you have multiplication and addition. So there's like 2 parts to evolution here. And we'll talk more about that another time. But I think that this is essentially multiplication and addition. But if you think about how this process what is the word? I always forget it. And it's when you're segmenting, I've said it so many times throughout the stream, like a hard drive, when you're dividing a hard drive, basically, or like that starts with 1. Gosh, I'm just having a brain fart. And it's oh my gosh, I've said it already like 4 or 5 times in this stream, but you get what I'm saying. When you start with 1, let's say that model that I showed you of like the 3 and 2 manifold, in the context of my theory, it would imply that multiplication and division are not 2 different actions. They are 2 perspectives of the same action. Same thing with addition and subtraction. And same thing with exponentiation and parentheses, which is containing. So growth and containment. And so think about this. Think about you have 2 plates, and one of them has a cake on it. And you need to put cake on the plate with no cake on it. You have to add cake to the plate with no cake on it. How do you add cake to that plate? You have to subtract from the plate with cake on it. You have to subtract from the one cake to add. You have to subtract from the one plate with cake on it to add to the cake with no plate on it. to the plate with no cake on it. That's two sides of one action. You have to subtract in order to add, because in metamathematics or metaphysics, you're starting from one entity. You can't add anything else other than taking from this one entity. Same thing with multiplication and division. Think of a cell. You start with a single cell. How do you multiply that cell? By dividing that cell. And so in this holonic context, then sentient singularity theory is within. Multiplication and division are not two different mathematical actions. They're one mathematical action and two perspectives of it. Same thing with addition and subtraction. Same thing with exponentiation and encapsulation, essentially. Exponentiation and encapsulation. I'm going to write that down. But I've always looked for words for that. Parentheses. But where is it? By the time I find it, I'm gonna forget. Okay, here it is. Let's do over here. Let's do encapsulation. I don't know how to spell encapsulation. I know that's wrong. Maybe that's correct. I don't know. Lation. I don't know. And exponentiation. There probably is a word for this already for this, but I just don't know it. But this should be there. Containing and expanding, encapsulation and exponentiation. Good. So, this is a new context to metamathematics that is shown when you show that not only is there quantities generated from singularity, but quantity is a multiplicity, like 2 or 4 or whatever. But there's also a connection between how these are generated, which causes an entanglement structure that you can see, literally an entanglement structure of the spin sequence that I showed you earlier that's very clearly a helical structure. It shows that the double helix is not random. It's the structure of information coherence. There's something about the relationships between these different parts and not just what they are, but where they are. And this is why this has implications on gene editing. It implies that you're going to miss something if you're gene editing. I used to be very pro genetic engineering of plants and stuff, because I was you're just making corn that can grow better in certain places. And I'm not talking about selective breeding. That is that maintains coherence. But I'm talking about genetic modification, artificial genetic modification. And you hear all these people. I remember when I first started at PragerU, this was when I used to work there, but it was my first week. And the very first video that they put out my very first week was one that I loved at the time. And now I'm I think that was wrong. And it's about genetic modification. And it's one of the most controversial videos out there because so many people just were not liking it. And it wasn't because of political reasons, but it was beyond that. And even internally they were surprised at how controversial that video was. And I was it was my job to put this video on the internet as my first task working there. And I'm sure it's still out there. And I was I put it up and I was I can't believe the response. It just grows better food. It's still food. They test the nutrients in this food and it's still all there, it seems, at least as far as I'm aware. But then you have this crowd being no, you don't get the nutrients from it. But the thing is we've co-evolved with all of this. We're part of this intertwined, entangled system. And so you can't just edit out certain things and expect the coherence to be maintained. So even if you test in a lab that it has the same amount of protein, maybe it has more protein, maybe it has more calcium if it's genetically modified. But that doesn't mean that your body will recognize the information, because remember, coherence of information and information itself is context, and you've edited the context. And so it makes sense that maybe there's the same amount or more nutrients on paper, but it wouldn't necessarily be recognized and absorbed in your body the same way, because this is an entangled system. It's not isolated bits. And, imagine if I go here, okay, to this sequence, and I'm like, you know what? This is pretty good. But I don't like this one thing. Okay? And, or, no, this is like big piggybacking actually off of a different system, but here, if I go here. Okay. What's it piggybacking on? Over here. That's piggybacking off of that. Okay, so let's just go to this one, the Fibonacci sequence. I could get it to work there, but I'm just not gonna. I don't want to break my Excel tablet right now, and I don't want to waste your time. But imagine I go here, and I'm just like, all of this is now different, guys. Did you see everything change? I didn't just edit one thing. Everything changed. This might have even changed. You can't just go in and be like, you know what? CRISPR, there. It's very precise. I got into a huge argument with a geneticist or somebody involved in genetic engineering and a bunch of people involved in AI on Clubhouse a long time ago, a couple years ago. And it was like, maybe it was like a year ago, but it was like a huge wasn't like a huge argument, but we were not getting along, and I was being respectful, but like they were mocking me literally, and the guy who was this Russian geneticist, he's like, he's trying to explain while I'm on the call, like right there, like listening, we're all involved in a conversation. I wasn't even in the crowd. And he's explaining to the others why I might be hesitant about CRISPR. And he's like, Tyler, he probably, he has this amateur view because he's an amateur. And, they read about in Popular Mechanics or something like that, this might be like genetically engineered babies might be bad for the future and might cause, diseases or something. And, he's not aware of the state of the art where we're now able to be even more precise. We can really just change exactly what we want. And if he really, if he wasn't an amateur, then, he would get it. He literally said it like that. And I was like flabbergasted that he was speaking about me as if I wasn't there in this like very condescending way. And I just responded. I was like, I don't care how precise you guys can be. I actually know that, like, I don't think that there's a limit to how precise you can be to the point of one gene eventually. Like, even if maybe now it's even that precise, but that's not the point. That's not my concern. My concern is that you're editing interconnected information and you don't understand that you're basically breaking the coherence of a chain of information. That's what I'm concerned about. And I'm not claiming to know what it's going to do. I'm just claiming to know that claiming to think that is what is, that you're going to end up changing things, not just that. And then they go and they change these CRISPR babies in China to make them, these two girls, to make them, immune to HIV and have higher IQs. And now China's keeping it pretty under, wraps as far as like all the implications of this, because they jailed the geneticist who did this. I think they might have let him out, but he was not supposed to do it, and he did it. And then I did read, though, that tests had revealed that like lots of changes had happened in their genome from it. And that they basically lost track of what really happened, because that change affected other things, affected other things, affected other things, affected other things, and who knows what it's going to do to these girls, because they would probably not tell us for a very long time, even if they knew, because they don't want the world to be angry at them. But when we have a mathematical model of a helical chain of information, and you are precise enough to just change one thing, none of these are the same now. Don't tell me it's about precision. I don't care if you can change that without, and that by accident, and that by accident, but now you're so precise you could just change the one. It doesn't matter. Every single other one of these was changed. And there's no logic that's causing them to think about that like that, because they didn't start from first principles from the very start of thinking about information. They just went to school for genetics, and they learned these things, and then they ended up becoming the people in Jurassic Park who never stopped to think if they should. I'm not saying they're making velociraptors, but I did see that they made a chicken with teeth, so they're getting close. Bow to the Tao. That's funny. But don't. When was the Good Samaritan lost? Follow the golden rule and you will live forever, period. The golden rule is golden. What if the being beyond you is found in yourself? It is in yourself, but it's also beyond you. It is in yourself. God is in you, but you are not God. You're a piece of God. Flow state is huge. Yes, it is. Not emptiness, infinite potential. I think meditation, clear your mind, is about letting go of the judgments and enter the subjective state of perception. It's adding yin sauce to your yang stew. I get that, but it's still misunderstood, I think. There's no context. There's not enough context. I'm not going to say there's no context. There's not enough context. Heya. Galax ER. Okay, what's up, memes again? And therefore the opposite of logical. I like Kurt and I agree with this sentiment and his sentiment, but I think you are taking it too far. It's applicable in a general sense, but you can't be used as a blanket way of viewing every case. I'm not viewing it every case. I'm just saying it's a generality. I'm not talking about exceptions. I'm talking about rules. That's it. But I agree with you. I cried. I cried too. Memes. It's not a feminine thing. I will say this. I'm more likely to tear up in a movie than my wife. That's fine. It doesn't make me less of a man. But there are things that are masculine that are important too to recognize, and there are things that are feminine. But they are based on relationships. How do you respond? How do you act? That's what it's about. It's not about whether or not you are emotional or cry. People say the feminine is emotion and the masculine is logic. That's not true. It's about what's motivating both of those and where is it found. Women's logic is found much more so in their instincts. Their instincts are very logical, but they're also highly contextual, much more highly contextual. And whereas our logic as men is not found as much in our instincts the same way. It's found in moments. Whereas, but our instincts are kind of emotional. It's different. It's different. But everybody's emotional. And everybody's has logic and emotion. It's about where it is. It's not about whether or not one is logical versus the other. I messaged you on Instagram for Discord access. Please let me join. I will do that as soon as I get off the call. Not Spockter Pants. I don't know what that. I'm sorry if I butchered that, but I will let you join the Discord. Let you into the Discord once I get off this. Also, truth is relational. The Trinity reflects this. God is the interacting of the first person oneness or self, second person divine other or social realm, and third person is the narrator perspective. Yeah, truth is relational, but it's also, that doesn't make it not. This is what people don't understand when they say the truth is about perspective. The truth is relational. That's true, but it's also concrete within those relationships. Like, it's not just, it is a matter of perspective, but your perspective is still dictatory of the truth that you see. And but there is also truth beyond your perspective too. So like, it's still, there is a, at the end of the day, there is like a truth. And but it how you see it is based on your perspective, but, and even whether you see it, but it's still there, is my point. Does this mesh with your four perspective? Also true. But yes, that what you said about like the Trinity, triality, God having first person and second person, yes, it meshes with the four primary perspectives. Partitioning, Tech Padawan, thank you. Partitioning, that was the word that I was trying to get access to. I messaged you on Instagram. Okay, yeah. Do you mean root extraction, the opposite side of operation, which includes the process of exponentiation? Maybe that is what I mean. I need to look that up. Eugenics, adding the human genome is the butterfly effect run rampant inside us. Yeah. Yeah. I don't even need to think too much about that to probably say yeah. Like, it just, I'm not saying that there's no time. I'm just saying, like, I would be very, very, very cautious to think that it would be a good thing in the end, in the long run, for us to edit the human genome. Even if in the short run it would have incredible implications. And I think it would. I actually, I was waiting for CRISPR for years. I've just been like, I think it's just like amazing. It's going to cure every disease known to man. And it is. But it's going to also cause problems that we've never seen. No, I'm not, like, people will be like, oh, well, cancer is a concern. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about something different that we've never seen. I can't even tell you what it is because we've never seen it. That's what I would be, and so that's what I would be concerned about. And it seems an inevitability. It doesn't seem like a possibility. It seems like an inevitability. It seems like literally if you edited your genes, you're going to cause irreparable damage that would only be able to be healed by God. That is what I mean. Like, you couldn't go back and change the gene again. Like, and have everything go back. It's because it's a constant state it's in a constant state of motion. So things are referencing other things and referencing other things and referencing other things, and you change something and it's still going to reference those new changes and new changes. And you go back and you change it back, and it's like the decoherence is already there. And so I literally, I mean that completely. And I do think God will fix it, because I do think we're going to do this already. Like, we've already done it. We're going to continue to do it. I think there's no stopping it. And I also think that God will fix it. But it's going to take God to fix it. I really mean that. Like, what, religious people call the Messianic era, or the post-singularity world, but I don't just mean the tech singularity, but I mean like a wise tech singularity, like the human singularity. Basically, as Chris Langan says, there's like a tech singularity, and then there's a human singularity after that, and which is really a total singularity. And that, I think, is what you need to fix that, because you need someone who can see everything in order to fix that, because you've damaged coherence and you are still limited, and so you can't see the scope of the changes that you've made, and you would need like a God's eye view to see the scope of the changes that you made in order to fix it. And you would need to simultaneously fix it, not just one. But anyways, guys, please hit the like button if you like this. I am going to call it. I hope that this was an enjoyable stream, and that you know, you found it valuable, please share it with anybody who you did find it valuable with, and we will reconvene on a later date. I don't know if it will be this upcoming Sunday because I think it's Labor Day, or it is on Monday, and I might be on vacation. So, but if I am, then we will, we'll either reconvene before this or after. But I appreciate everybody. I appreciate the questions and everything, and the support, whether that's just engagement or hitting the like button. If you haven't, please do so. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the bell notification. And if you would like to join the Discord, private message me on Instagram. If you have already, I will send you the link right after this. But thank you, everyone. Peace.